Great, thanks. I'm Steve Hoyt. I own with my partner, Steve Nelson, Hoyt Properties, been around for a while. I think we've done 10 million square feet or so of industrial in the Twin Cities. It seems like a lot, but it's been a lot of years too. So when you divide it by 40, it's really not that much. We have a brokerage division as well. So I'll try to offer the developer, landlord, owner perspective where appropriate. Otherwise, we got some really smart brokers here. I promised Jeff that I'd give you my input on politics. I don't want to go too deep into it because I know Jim DePietro will do that after a while. So but just the impression that I've gotten from talking to my friends and people in government. First of all, on the federal level, I think everybody's reasonably pleased because we have gridlock, and gridlock is a good thing. Now we'll have gridlock if one of the two Georgia races goes Republican. However, there are 3 Republicans I know of that sometimes don't act like Republicans, so we really don't know what this bodes for us. But we'll see, and I think gridlock is a good thing. At least the stock market thinks it's a good thing. I think what might happen though, just in taking a page out of Governor Walz's notebook, I think that the only way that President Biden's going to get anything done is going to be by issuing executive orders, because nobody's going to pass anything. So he's going to have to use executive orders, and that ought to be a 3-ring circus. At the state level, I think it's just basically gridlock as well. I guess that I live in Minneapolis, and I can't believe that we elected Ilhan Omar again by a 75% to 25% vote, and she's in my district. So, I mean, you'll probably guess where I voted, but it's unbelievable. City of Minneapolis, nothing's changed. It's totally out of control, and policy from the city of Minneapolis is kind of interesting. Cam Gordon, who used to say he was a Republican, but there hasn't been a Republican council member in the city of Minneapolis for 21 years. So Cam thought it was a good idea to pass a ordinance that would require people who want to sell their property to give 2 weeks notice. Of course, the only reason for that is to encourage lawsuits. And as somebody in the city of Minneapolis, I think that what the city really needs is more people, encouraging people to come in to the city of Minneapolis, as opposed to discouraging them from participating in some way in the city. Fortunately, our people at NEILP and BOMA and other groups were able to get that ordinance put off, but that would be, I'm not sure what the reason for the ordinance is, but it certainly shouldn't be something that would be law. Okay, we're going to kick off the program here. Don't pick up your pencil yet, because there's not any really good stuff coming here for a second, but the market, I tell you what, the market is fabulous. And I think that those of us in the industrial business and those of us in the apartment business, which I'm not, we all feel pretty blessed. It could be worse. We could be in another market segment, and that wouldn't be so much fun. So I think it's important. Pick up your pencil. I think it's important to talk about statistics and vacancy and absorption and all that stuff. So I know nothing about that. So I'll hand that off to people on the panel.
I can fall on that sword. We'll try to keep that pretty light. The Twin Cities is the 16th largest MSA in the country. We got 330 million square feet of total industrial space, of which about 120 million is multi-tenant. The remainder would be more single tenant and owner occupied buildings. Overall, we're still in a really healthy zone with 6 to 7% vacancy. I guess to give you some perspective, anything under 10% we consider to be pretty healthy, and really we expect to see a lot of new construction with a vacancy under 10%. So, you know, with this year just being kind of an off year, we've actually seen, you know, about 1.7 million square feet of new construction continuing to be built. And, you know, in the very best of years, in the last 10 years, we might have seen 2.5 million square feet. So I guess it gives you a little bit of perspective that, hey, you know, we're certainly off the highest peak, but by no means are we struggling. By no means is industrial having a really tough year, because I think just going into this pandemic, we certainly had a little bit of a hit a speed bump probably, you know, March, April, May, and then really everything kind of turned back on this summer. And I think overall everybody has a pretty good outlook on the future for industrial. So as far as other absorption, you know, this year through Q3, we have about 700,000 square feet of positive absorption. Again, a good typical year, the last 10 years, it's been, you know, well over 2 million square feet of positive absorption every single year. So certainly slowed down, but I think it's still overall positive. So.
Anything to add from the Lee team and from Cush?
Well, I would say the COVID, Nate did kind of touch on it, but I think we probably would have seen more buildings going up this last summer, but COVID definitely stopped that from happening. And I think as a result, with the vacancies across the board being in the single digits, 2021 will likely be a busy year on both the spec development as well as build-to-suits.
Yeah, I think you're going to see that vacancy drop considerably more just because of the limited spec construction that was built this year. There was a lot of buildings that were out there, were pad ready to go, but you know, we're kind of waiting for somebody to come along. And the buildings that did go up, most of them have filled up fairly quickly. So I think you're going to see this little compression of the vacancy rate, and then you know, because obviously we can't build during the winter, and then all of a sudden come spring, we're going to be seeing a lot of things popping out of the ground just to be able to meet that demand that's still existing. And by then, people have figured out what the new normal is. Because at the end of the day, I mean, business never likes uncertainty. And that's what always, when the pause is, you know, we had earlier in the year. If there's any uncertainty, they pump the brakes and say, okay, what is the new normal? And business is smart enough. They just take a little bit of time, figure it out, and they move forward, whatever the new normal is. So I think by next year, there's going to be people have it figured out, understand what's going on. And I think there's going to be considerable amount of activity, you know, in 21.
That's good. I have nothing to add because we disbanded our research department at Hoyt Properties a little bit ago. And so we don't get that information, but we get it from the big guys. Vacancy. I hate the word vacancy. It's so negative. I mean, why don't we use the word occupancy? Now I know it's one more math function or one more math deal to use, but
too many
I like
syllables.
to talk. Yeah. So I like to talk about occupancy.
Or it could be
yeah.
Opportunity.
Opportunity. That's what it is. You know, the only people that care about vacancy, I think, are bankers and then the guy with the vacant building. I always thought that, you know, if the guy across the street from me is vacant, and if my building is full, then I guess that's a 50% vacancy rate in the market. But I just think that vacancy kind of in the eye of the beholder. The other thing about industrial, and this is unlike any other asset class that there is, with industrial, you can almost kind of sprinkle some water on the ground and have a building 6 months later. It doesn't take long to give birth to an industrial building. And so these numbers can change pretty darn quick because supply can grow very quickly. Okay, brokerage, deal velocity. You know, brokers only make money if they're doing deals, making commissions. We're going to talk about commissions after a little bit. That's my favorite topic. But deal velocity. I know in our shop, and we got 5 brokers in our shop, small shop, but deal velocity is down. But it's a little different too. The deals that we're seeing are a little different. How about you guys?
Well, Chris and I actually get together with a number of young brokers, or I guess we're not
Younger.
Younger. Yeah. We, and you know, we talk about deals in the market and track tenants. And I think the last tally we had, you know, probably 85, 95 tenants on that list. And the total demand ranges from 5.5 to 6.5 million square feet. And I mean, that's still a very healthy level of demand. And I would say it's it's representative of pre-COVID times too. That's pretty consistent. And the distribution of those requirements is I would say it's pretty evenly spread across the bread and butter deals of 20, 30, 40,000 square feet. And also we've got plenty of deals, 100,000 square feet and 100,000 square feet and over. I think it was 22 users that were out looking for space, and whether all those 22 land, you know, it's probably unlikely. Most of them will end up probably staying put, renewing, or you know, maybe the requirement goes away, but there's probably 8 to 10 solid build-to-suit deals out there today that are 100,000 square foot plus.
Yeah, and I would say of those 100,000 square foot plus, I think we're starting to see the top end being larger than we've seen in the past. You know, where I mean, you're looking at, you know, 300, 400, 500, you know, 750, $1 million. You're starting to see bigger opportunities surface here and then we've had in the past, because like now, because of the changing distribution model, I think people now see this as they have enough critical mass where they need to be here, where you never used to see those large of a deals. I mean, that's why, you look, most of the buildings in our market are about 200,000 square feet, roughly, give or take, when they build them. You know, you see a couple of 300,000s, and, you know, you don't have a lot of options. But I mean, if you guys
the Twin Cities industrial market, the bread and butter used to be 20 to 75,000 square feet. And now it seems to be 75,000 square feet plus. I know you don't like the word vacancy, Steve, but before our session here, I did just go on both CoStar and Catalyst Mincar and looked at what we have right now for product that is 100,000 square feet and larger that's vacant. There are only about 15 to 20 buildings that are available for lease right now. And those are buildings too that aren't necessarily the most, you know, modern and functional type of product that companies want to see now. So they want at least 24 clear, good parking, loading in the back, office in the front, trailer parking too. You know, a lot of these 15 to 20 buildings that I counted off, you know, they don't have that. And the good quality buildings that are available right now, the activity on them is actually very strong.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to kind of the change in the supply chain. I mean, as all these companies went, I mean, they built their supply chain just for efficiency, and they became very efficient. But if there's any little hiccup, and it's just not hiccup at here or there, I mean, we're talking country-wise, you know, between China. I mean, it's major hiccups. So now I think you're starting to see a lot of these distribution companies, you're starting to see now they build their model out for resiliency, to be able to handle some of these changes, to be able to adapt, to be able to flex. And also, I think kind of coming through this whole COVID thing, I think a lot of them decided, you know, we need to have more inventory on hand than we did previously. So that's where you're seeing a lot of these companies expanding and taking more space, is just because of that, just be able to not really disrupt their supply chain as much as they had, you know, previously.
And even though industrial sounds as simple as just pouring some water in the ground and it's there. They definitely are taking longer. They're getting harder and more complicated. And I think it all goes back to just the challenges of trying to find good locations to put up these buildings. And, if you're looking at infill redevelopment, there's zoning issues, environmental contamination concerns, things of that. And then, trying to just put up a basic box of an industrial building can be quite the challenge.
And don't forget the neighbors.
Don't forget the neighbors.
The neighbors.
Yeah, not in my backyard.
But those are big numbers. I'm in the flex business, flex value add, and boy, if we see a 10,000 square foot deal, we just jump all over ourselves. But these are big numbers, lots of square footage. I was having a drink with my good friend Tom Shaver the other day, and we're talking about the difference between these flex multi-tenant buildings and these multi-tenant bulk logistics kind of buildings. And we said, with a flex tenant, it seems like it just takes 4 to 5 months to get a deal done. I don't know why. Well, I do know why, but it just takes forever to get these deals done. Then you get a bulk user who come in and you'll look at a 300,000 square foot space. He'll say, "I'll take it." So big difference between these the bulk mentality and the need for space as opposed to the flex market and the multi-tenant market. There's different kind of so when you're out talking to people who want to sell their building or buy a building or lease space, you're seeing different kinds of people too now, aren't you?
Yeah, well, for me and my team anyways this year, and I think a lot of other brokers will agree, in 2020, our new prospect meetings, I would say over half of them were with companies that are looking to sell their business too. And I think what that is baby boomers are looking to retire now. And so spending our time working with them to not only make sure that they're capitalizing and maximizing the value of their business, but also maximizing the value of their real estate. And in addition to that, companies are just getting smarter and understanding that there's a great opportunity out there in leveraging their real estate, meaning, sale leaseback, investment sales, back to people that are looking to retire. They sell their business, but keep their real estate, and then that's their retirement income. So we've been seeing a lot of those type of transactions, and I think we'll see more of them. We just saw in the Business Journal 2 days ago, Bix Produce just did a 20-year sale leaseback of their building in Little Canada to WP Carey for $34 million. And that's just an example, and I think we're going to see a lot more of those in the future.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, we've done a number of sale leasebacks this year just because of that. I mean, they see that the real estate market is, at a high level here, and they're able to take the cash, redeploy it back into their business rather than having to go out and, put more debt on their company. So a lot of companies have seen it really as an advantage. So we've been actually pretty busy with sale leasebacks and a number of companies, and just not even here within the metro, even kind of on the periphery a little bit.
And private equities are approaching a lot of these businesses too. And I think it's pretty typical that private equities are not interested in owning real estate. So there's that point to take into consideration as well.
On the landlord side too, I would say we've gotten a lot more institutional too, with the rise of coastal money in the Twin Cities with Blackstone, Prologis. And I guess Prologis is peeling off a part of their portfolio here. And I think it'll certainly open up more opportunities for additional institutional money to come in here, which, it's good for the landlord side because they control, Blackstone has about 14 million square feet here. Capital Partners has probably another 8. Between the two of those groups, and Prologis has 2.5 million. I mean, they control about 20% of the multi-tenant market. So you start to see some of those big behemoths come here, and they're able to have a lot more pricing power. So for a long time, it was just local owners that want to be nice, Minnesota nice, like Steve. I'm sure he's giving away tons of free rent and doing 3-year deals. But now guys like you can take advantage of that pricing power and start pushing rates, because really over the last 10, 20 years, rates have been pretty flat. And I think you'll start to see a change in that in the coming years. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think Steve can attest this. Back in the 70s, it was probably 750, 350, and then in the 80s it was 8 and 4, and even in the early 2000s, maybe 8 and a quarter, 450 still. So I mean, the rates really haven't moved until the last couple of years, when you really get this outside money that's in here into this market, really taking a dominant position and trying to push rates.
Yeah, I think so. These sale leasebacks are. They are a good deal because that takes the debt off the balance sheet. These companies could go borrow at 3%, but instead they do a sale leaseback at a 6 cap. So they're paying a price for it, but still it takes it off their balance sheet. And a lot of times they can take a lot of cash out of the deal. Before we leave the big space subject, I'll just tell you about the biggest deal I ever did. Speaking of being a nice guy, biggest deal I ever did was with Best Buy. And it was 425,000 square feet in South Bloomington, their distribution warehouse in 1987. They only had 42 stores at that time. So you think back to what a young company they were. But my brother and I did that deal. I think it took us maybe 30 days to get the lease done. And we got to negotiate directly with the founder of that company. Nice guy, toughest guy I've ever met. Fair, but a nice guy, just the same. So we get everything pretty much ironed out, and the last point was we got down to arguing over a penny a foot. Now a penny is a big deal to electronics retailers, and it's a big deal when you're talking, I suppose, when you're talking 425,000 square feet. But we got down to a penny, and we were I think we argued about the penny more than we argued about anything. And finally, my brother said, "Dick, you can have the penny." He said, "But I'm not going to paint your building." And Dick said, "I don't care about paint." He said, so we did the deal and gave him the penny. Now that, I think, is where copper wire was invented. Dick and my brother arguing over a penny. But it was a fun exercise, and we built the building. It's still there. I think it's 600,000 square feet now or something like that. And the good thing is Dick and I got to be friends. The investment market, I like to say, never go into a deal unless you can kind of figure out where you're going to be, how you're going to get out of it. I mean, getting into a dead-end deal is no fun. But we all think about, well, we're going to sell our building someday. So we're going to go in, we're going to buy an empty building, we're going to fill it up, we're going to lease it up, we're going to buy something, add some value to it, whatever. But you got to sell that building to take some chips off the table at some point. So what's the investment market like today for you guys?
Well, I think we touched a little bit on it previously, but it's healthy. Industrial has weathered the storm probably better than any other product type. When you're looking at office, retail, hospitality, you're seeing a lot of money flow into industrial for a number of different reasons. Industrial companies, for the most part, didn't suffer mandatory shutdowns. A lot of them were considered essential. As far as replacing industrial properties, you really can't replace a manufacturing or distribution facility with a Zoom call. So, I mean, those buildings are essential to their businesses. And as far as distancing and in maintaining CDC guidelines. It's pretty easy to do that within a manufacturing or distribution facility because we have about 25% of the people within our building versus, compared to a retail or office building. And then, finally with e-commerce, it continues to eat retail's lunch. And for the most part, we are the beneficiaries, or industrial property owners are the beneficiaries of that. So industrial is still the darling and has been for the last 10 years. And I think it'll continue to be so.
And I think the cap rates are going to continue to get pushed down. I think a lot of developers and investors that still aren't in our market yet are really trying to enter. I think the East Coast and West Coast are just about as drilled down as you can get as far as squeezing out any value there. So been having a lot of meetings the last 6 months with groups that are very interested in entering our market. And I think, in addition to the development that we're going to see occur in 2021, it's going to come with people that we haven't seen before, whether they're going to be putting up a building or buying product. Like we'll see what happens with this Prologis investment sale.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're also seeing not only just the investment in the real estate, you're also seeing, Blackstone went out and put up a fund. Now they're going on the opposite side, and they said they'd rather buy the debt cheap for some of these non-core assets, not industrial, everything else. Buy the debt on that, and they'll end up getting that building even a lot cheaper than they could buy it today, and then hopefully play the next cycle. So you're seeing a couple of groups even now starting to create funds that are just buying debt on the other side of it, try to pick up some of these buildings in the downturn.
Yeah. And interest rates too. I mean, the Fed just recently announced that they were going to keep interest rates at or near zero through 2023. I mean, we'll certainly have some cap rate compression with that. And with these coastal owners, they're used to paying 3 caps on the coast. And I mean, it's all about IRR, right? So as long as they can prove that rent growth, and I think we'll start to see cap rates in that low 5s, maybe even sub 5 cap here in the Twin Cities, which has really never been the case before. But that's really that's being driven by rent growth and having some of these larger owners have higher pricing power.
I love it. So we buy a lot of stuff here in Minneapolis, and it's a great market. But what about seems to be some activity going on in Fargo, Sioux Falls, Des Moines, Eau Claire? Have you guys seen any of that?
Yes, and my biggest project this year that I worked on was in Owatonna. My team represented Bosch companies with a 265,000 square foot build-to-suit with Opus. It's a distribution facility to service their manufacturing plant that they have in Owatonna. And so worked on that. We're also seeing outside of the metro, other big deals occurring, such as White Claw or Cold Springs Brewing. Scannell's putting up a 600,000 square foot building for them in Cold Springs, just a little bit outside of St. Cloud. So the development outside of the Twin Cities metro and greater Minnesota is strong. A lot of it having to do with just servicing manufacturing facilities that are in outstate. I think another important point to that too, that we've been seeing a lot of is just labor related. And I think a lot of companies in the Twin Cities in the future are going to be really looking into where they place their real estate. And I think that might lead to going more on the fringe versus the core. So we'll see how that plays out in the future.
Yeah, because I think it goes back to a lot of these companies now want the modern buildings, you know, and you don't have the land, you don't have what it takes to, you know, have it close, you know, so then you're starting to see them jump out and, you know, take some of these land positions that are kind of outside of the core where, you know, we typically see them.
Yeah, it does seem that the companies that we're working with care a little bit more about image these days, and maybe because we, you know, they have kind of an image problem, maybe to recruit employees into manufacturing and distribution. I mean, it's not necessarily a sexy industry to get into, but if you can, you know, get into more of a modern building, you know, have a building that you can be proud of going to work to, you know, every day, that certainly makes a huge effect. Especially pre-COVID, we were at about 3% of 3% unemployment, and now it's ticked up to about 6%, but I think that'll recover pretty quickly. But when it's really a competitive labor market, you got to do some of those small things and to be able to get the best talent.
Yeah, I mean, because you look, I mean, it still, you know, I talk with clients and still one of their biggest issues is attracting and retaining quality workforce. I mean, it's just still, and you look at the unemployment numbers, you're like, how can that be? You know, but I mean, that's still, and that goes back to, you know, you need a little bit better image, a little bit better, you know, working conditions to be able to attract and retain the quality talent that you want. Because, I mean, no longer is it the sodium halides in the warehouse at, you know, 30-foot candles where everything's orange and you can hardly see in the back. I mean, those days are long gone, but I mean, nobody wants to work in that. So, I mean, you have the clear story windows and, you know, painted decks and, you know, well-lit warehouses. And I mean, it's just changing to be able to, you know, people, you know, just feel better coming to work.
You know, speaking of these outlying secondary markets, I think the most fun deal I have done to this day was taking Hutchinson technology from Minnesota to Sioux Falls. So I got a call from the director of economic development in Sioux Falls Foundation, Roger Hange, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. And so Roger said, you know, you're really building some nice stuff in Minneapolis. We could use some of those nice buildings here in Sioux Falls. So why don't you come and build a multi-tenant spec building? But we had nothing else to do. So we built a big spec multi-tenant building in Sioux Falls. And it just kind of sat there for a little while. And then I got a call from Roger, and he said, why don't you come out to Sioux Falls? I sat down with the Governor Mickelson, and Roger, and we put together a package to get Hutchinson into Sioux Falls. And up until this time, is an interesting market. When I went out there for the first time, and I think Fargo is the same thing, and Des Moines maybe to a lesser extent, but went into Sioux Falls, and up until that time, whenever anybody needed space, they just built a building, but it was a steel building, it was a metal building, so not really institutional quality. So we said, well, we'll build we did a FabCon multi-tenant building. It was really good looking. So we got them in there, and I think today, I don't know, they've got 150,000 square feet or so. But today, when I go to Sioux Falls, I look at that park by the airport, and I can't believe what we started. It's just an amazing story that Sioux Falls has put together, and it too is today. I'm not going to say it's a coastal kind of an investment market, but it certainly is a good market for investors. Postscript to that, very sadly, both the governor and Roger Hange died in a plane crash not long after we did the deal. They were in Indiana, trying to get some company to come up to Sioux Falls from Indiana. Sadly, their plane crashed. Hutch is still there. I'm wondering, guys, you know, you work for big shops, and I've had the pleasure of doing business with all of your shops over the years. But you do a lot more than leasing in your company. Do you do property management, and do you interface and talk to your property management people?
At Cushman and Wakefield, yeah, we're global for full service real estate firm, one of the largest property managers in town. My team, most of our business is a lot of just representing individual companies. We do work with a handful of larger landlords in town too, and then in turn working with the property managers. With that though, it's definitely always good staying in front of them and making sure that the tenants in the buildings are happy and staying put and hopefully moving towards renewal and staying in the space.
Yeah, property management, I didn't realize this. I thought brokers were the ones that were bringing in all the dough to these shops, but we're just chopped liver compared to property managers. They're a nice, consistent income for these brokerage or for these real estate services companies. So, and that certainly feeds the brokerage business too. You know, having property management and I would say capital markets would probably be the second most important service line for real estate services because it's more of a holistic approach. I would add, as tenants get more sophisticated, we are seeing more of those tenants require project management services or labor labor teams, you know, incentive negotiation teams when we're looking at, say, Minneapolis versus Chicago or Minneapolis is, you know, versus Denver. Some of those companies really have to dive in and understand every single detail of the transaction, far greater than just what's, you know, what are the lease terms, what's the rental rate. They want to understand really everything about where they're going to locate. So it's really becoming a holistic type of offering for some of these clients.
Yeah, and we're currently don't have property management, but that's something that, you know, we've talked to a number of groups to actually acquire. So, I mean, we're still, so if you know anyone out there on a property management side, we'd be happy to talk with you. But no, I think it's very important, you know, throughout the years at all the other companies that I'd worked at. I mean, it's really key is the brokerage and the property management working hand in hand, because I think that ultimately gives the best service to the client. And ultimately, I mean, that's what our goal is at every transaction that we do. So they're very important to the company.
You know, from our perspective at Hoyt Properties, up until we sold our portfolio to Investors Real Estate Trust a number of years ago, we did our own property management. I think we had 5 million square feet in the Twin Cities, which was a lot, and you can make a lot of money at property management if you've got that much square footage. Recently, but since that time, we had been outsourcing it to Colliers and CB and Cushman, and really wonderful people. And I admire those shops that they're able to be multidisciplinary and work together as teams. It's really nice to see. We did bring it in-house though. About 4 months ago, we brought the property management in-house, and at our number of square feet, we can't make any money on it. But the important thing to us was that we came to understand that the primary relationship that the tenant has with our company is really the property manager. And we just felt that we needed to kind of shorten that communication string and have better communication with our tenants. So we brought it in-house, and so far it's working out pretty good.
I would add to that, Steve, that it's been our experience, especially with one of the large portfolios that we work on up in the Northeast in Arden Hills and Roseville area. It's about 2.5 million square feet. We're very hands-on with that project, both on the leasing and the management front, and that's benefited the client considerably over the last 2-3 decades that our team has worked on it, and that reduces brokerage fees where you have more direct deals, you have more trust within with the tenant and the landlord, and they stay within the portfolio longer. You know, they're not seeing landlords as commodities. They're looking at it as a actual relationship where they want to work with them. It's just like any other customer relationship. They want to work together. They want to grow. They want to, it could be growing or contracting, and just being able to service them well is something that, some of the local owners can still be their competitive advantage, especially as things get more institutional here.
Nate did touch on another important factor too, which is project management. So on the other end, the tenants, the companies, that are changing rapidly and are focused on branding and retaining good quality employees. Our team just won some business actually last week with a manufacturing company. And with that pitch, it required bringing on our project management team, our labor team, and our incentives team, and showing this business that we can assist them with all of that, and making sure that, if you stay, if you move, whatever you end up doing, we're here to assist with making sure that the labor is going to be right, making sure that you're going to get the incentives that your company deserves, and then obviously and ultimately finding a new home to move to, or staying put if that's the best option as well.
So my pet peeve is how long it takes to get deals done. And I mean, once in a while, we did a deal last week for 25,000 square feet that, honest to God, took 2 days to get done. But that's the exception. It takes forever. Chris, it took you 4 years to do the Bosch deal, right?
Not that long. I guess it felt like it. Started working with them the summer of 2018, and got to the lease negotiations at the beginning of this year. And then sure enough, what happened, COVID hit. And long story short, I would say that spent 30 days doing 2 years of work. And Greg, I know you know what I'm talking about. So that's there's that. It was 2 years in the making, and got done, and the walls are going up now. And other deals that I've been working on, and I think other brokers are seeing, is that we have these events, and you hear all the time that the deals keep getting longer and longer. And when the COVID hits, the civil unrest hits, they're going to be longer.
And I would say, the length of the deal can be attributed to such things as environmental work, right? You and I do plenty of sale deals where environmental is probably the most complicated part of making a sale, because by and large, when you sell an industrial building, you're going to do a phase one, and I would say 90 to 95% of the time, they're going to roll to a phase two. You're going to have to do subslab vapor testing. And the MPCA made a ruling about 3-4 years ago now that it's not good enough just to do one round of testing. You have to do a testing in the heating season and the cooling season. So if you're selling a building in June and you're doing your testing, you can't do the next round of testing until November. So that really lengthens the time that a sale can get done. Now, there are some kind of workarounds around that, but that certainly throws a major wrench into things. I would say there's other, much more simple things like technology that can, or I guess the lack thereof of the lack of technology. I just did a deal in Eden Prairie, and we had 2 decision makers. One was in Eden Prairie, one was in Des Moines, and then the landlord was in LA. And we had to send 3 hard copy leases via FedEx from Eden Prairie to Des Moines to LA back to Minneapolis. And it's like, there's such thing as DocuSign. I mean, what, what are we doing here? So especially on the industrial side, I think we're a little bit slow on the uptick on technology. And there's some of those things that could just really streamline the process. And, you know, we'll get there at some point, but, you know, we're working on it.
Yeah, and I think with those, and I think it's just the function of, you know, nobody's at the office. Everybody's, you know, like that remote. And it just always takes so much longer for people to collaborate and make decisions. You'd think it'd be easier, but, you know, it's not. It just seems to take longer and longer. And, you know, people have been busy, and a lot of it has just been trying to keep the business going.
And I would just say too, back to the COVID, we all saw, you know, deals either hit the pause button or they just died completely. In my team's case, you know, we had a handful of listings where the buyers just went away. So, you know, a lot of due diligence had already occurred. So the buildings are all teed up, ready to go with the, you know, environmental and order and everything else. But then what we're finding out is the buyer's bank and the SBA, lots of still stringent guidelines, or maybe still having to redo the environmental again, even though it was just done in the spring.
Yeah. My people I like to blame are the cities and lawyers. How about city deserves most of the blame, don't they, Duane?
Yeah, usually common sense never finds its way in.
And the MPCA.
Well, most of the parties involved are incentivized to get the deal done, right? Brokers,
Not lawyers.
bankers, they're not getting, well, I suppose most of them have salaries, but they have some incentive to get a deal done. But yeah, when you're charging by the hour or you have absolutely no incentive to get it done, those are the ones that you have to certainly massage a little bit and keep them motivated.
You do need to remind the banker when the actual due diligence is up, because they seem to forget quite a bit.
And then lie about it. You have to take a week off. I don't want to speak ill of my legal brethren. Most of my friends are lawyers, but you know, lawyers really can make this more difficult than it needs to be. And things haven't changed really in the past 35 years. I remember I had a deal, and it was 7,500 square feet in Eden Prairie. And this was a startup, but they had a lot of VC money and a startup. And we had a form lease that we used, and most people sent it back and just signed it. But in this case, the lawyer, I won't name the law firm, but the lawyer came back with 69 comments on this form for a 7,500 square foot deal. And I called the lawyer up, who was a friend of mine, and I said, you know, I won't tell you his name. I said, you know, none of these comments matter to me. None of them. I said, but you can have 4 of them. And I don't care which 4 you take 4. And he said, well, I'll look stupid to my client. I said, I mean, that's your problem. I said, they don't make any sense. So I think that sometimes lawyers can drag it on a little bit. And yeah, and in their defense, I think what is also happening is today there are a lot of decision makers who can't make a decision. And sometimes they can't because they're not supposed to. They've got a board they got to answer to. They got to do a focus group, and they got to, you know, do all this stuff, and it just drags on and on and on. It isn't like, now once in a while we'll see that CEO who owns the company, and he or she will make the decision, and we're off to the races. But many times this committee mentality really gets in the way of getting deals done.
And Steve, I would say on a positive note, a good story, client that I represent just tied up a property in the North Metro, investment sale opportunity, where it was a good enough opportunity. They're just a small local family that own a handful of properties around town, so they understand it, but they went ahead and put the property under contract with the agreement that they're going to pay it all cash and do no environmental work. So taking that risk for the opportunity that's there. So people are learning. They understand the circumstances that come with the environmental stuff, and it's a positive story, I guess, with all the negative that we're seeing in regards to environmental.
Okay, one last thing. You gave me the mic, so I get to talk about this. Commissions. Are commissions getting out of hand?
No.
They're too low? Yeah.
Too low.
No, I actually had a conversation with an institutional owner out of Chicago, and they were asking some of those same questions, on a new deal versus renewal. And, they're very much used to paying reduced fees on renewals. And I would say for the most part, especially on the tenant rep side, you're pretty much getting the same fee on a new deal versus a renewal. And you guys can maybe pitch in on what you've been seeing. But for the most part, it's pretty much across the board, very similar on new versus renewal.
I've been seeing renewals taking a hit there as far as just a new deal. You get a higher fee and lower for a renewal. I would say just big picture. Overall, it seems, as the landlords continue to become more, institutional, bigger, sophisticated, they're smart, they really know what they're doing. So it seems like there could be an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end too, gave the example of the business that we just won last week where, the tenant needs not just brokerage services, but a number of other services to go along with the deal. So there's definitely opportunities to save money, make more money, all good.
Yeah, I mean, they've been the same for a while, compared to other markets. They, I think we're in line or could use a little bump.
I think
I remember John Allen, my good friend John Allen, back when he was a broker and he was only about this big, and he called me up and he said, Stevie, he said, I got a 25,000 square foot tenant for your new building in Bloomington, and I'm going to need $2 a foot for the tenant. And I said, well, John, if you do the math, 76543, I said, we're going to pay you $2.50 a foot. He said, thanks for pointing that out. Now, actually, John, I think learned how to do the math pretty well over the next few years. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. And can we take a question? There are not many people here. I think we're over time. Oh, we got a question. Well, I don't know. The question from the young lady is, she's working on an appraisal. She's an appraiser, and it's this old building, big building, 250,000 square foot, owner user with the existing roof. Is there a market for that today?
Oh, can I get your card afterwards? Yes.
Well, I think a developer that's doing well in that space is Hillcrest. I mean, and maybe that's one of their buildings that you're talking about, and they've gotten really creative with taking really dilapidated buildings a lot of the times in the Midway and cutting them up into smaller bays and leasing them out. And I think there's a building that I walked through this summer with them. They had a variety of different uses. It wasn't just all manufacturing and distribution. It was actually a lot of specialty uses. One space was like a MMA, fighting place. And there was, I'm trying to think of some of the other uses in there, but it's made some of these landlords get really creative in what they're doing. And especially if it's in an infill location, that gritty industrial look is actually kind of in vogue right now with the polished concrete and the exposed ceilings. A lot of different companies are interested in leasing space like that. So I think there is certainly a demand for it, but not necessarily from your prototypical clients that we're working with.
Yeah,
I think everything's sound.
yeah. And I think your other option is just look at it as a land basis. If there's enough land there, you tear it down, and if you're kind of less than Opus paid for their Golden Triangle site, you might have an opportunity to build something.
Yeah. Okay, well, we had a great time. We're going to wrap it up. I hope this hour went fast for you. This, last November when I was doing this panel, I walked off. I was talking to a guy who I didn't know, and I said, "So that moved pretty fast?" And he said, "Felt like 10 minutes." And I said, "That's great." He said, "Underwater." So, so there we go. So thanks to my panel, and looking forward to seeing you again next year.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep,
Thanks,
thank
Steve.
you.
All right.